Call the meeting to order at 7:03 p.m. Jennifer, may we have a roll call?
Mr. Baker?
Here.
Ms. Buda?
Here.
Ms. Grisham?
Here.
Ms. Oliver?
Here.
Mr. Patel?
Here.
Ms. Victor Bishop?
Here.
And Ms. Unicole?
Not only do we have quorum, we have perfect attendance. Great job, everyone. Moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any items from the consent agenda that anyone would like removed and moved into the main agenda? None. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as approved? Janet, can I get a second? Second. Thanks, Maura. And a roll call, please, Jennifer.
Mr. Baker?
Aye.
Ms. Buda?
Yes.
Ms. Grisham?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Ms. Victor Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Unicole?
Yes. It does not appear that we have any members of the public here this evening, so we will move into staff reports.
All right, well, I am very excited to introduce you to one of our staff. She is not going to be talking about what she does here, which is work in the circulation department, but Katie Suarez has been with us as a first as a summer reading aide and now as a circulation clerk. She's currently going to get her master's in sustainability at Harvard and came to me earlier this year and said, I have to do a report for school on carbon emissions, and I would really like to do it on the library. And I was so excited because my friend does scope 3 emission stuff. I'm like, I know what this is. And so soon too will all of you. And so she is coming today just to share what she did in her report. This is not anything we have to take action on. It's more just education and information, and provides a baseline for us to then use as we move forward and continue all the sustainability work that we've been doing at the library. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Katie.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Kate, and I'm so glad for the opportunity to share some of my sustainability work with you all. And with that, I will get started. So beyond the books, sustainability library. Starting out with the background, just a bit about carbon accounting. This is the measurement of the organization's greenhouse gas emissions. Just like financial accounting tracks dollars, carbon accounting tracks carbon emissions or other greenhouse gases that we pollute into the atmosphere. With carbon accounting in the identifiers and build an effective mitigation strategy. And with increasing legislation, it's important to publicly disclose sustainability footprints and how emissions are broken down into 3 different scopes as defined by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is like the gold standard of carbon accounting. So we have scope 1 right in the middle. These are the direct greenhouse gas emissions coming from company-owned assets. So the building itself or any vehicles that a company owns. Then we have scope 2 indirect emissions. Those are from any purchased electricity, heating. And then we have scope 3, which is basically everything else. We have upstream activities there, scope 3, and downstream activities from the reporting company. And you can see those are further broken down into 2 categories. It's a little small right now, but I'm going to focus on scope 3 on the next slide. It's the focus of my report. So scope 3 emissions actually contribute the majority of emissions in a company's footprint, over 90% on average. Today I'm going to be focusing on categories 1 and 9. Category 1 is purchase goods and services. You can see it on the far left. Over there, it's one of the upstream activities. Category 9 is one of the downstream activities, transportation distribution. You can see it in the center right there. I guess I'll pause here for any questions in general about carbon accounting or greenhouse gas emissions. Or jump in. So as I mentioned, focusing on these 2 categories here, I worked with some of the library directors to choose categories that were meaningful to the library as well as would likely be non-negligible. Wouldn't want to calculate anything that just comes to 0, right? So for purchase goods and services, this included physical items added to the library collection. We decided this scope would be defined to the calendar year 2024, which is at last full complete. We also chose to exclude electronic materials as it would be somewhat ambiguous or difficult to get that data. For downstream transportation distribution, this includes any transportation required to get requested materials to our patrons. Category 1 purchase goods and services. I started out with this table 1 on the left here. This was provided by Brian in our technical services department. This is how much we spent in calendar year 2024 by material type. You'll see broken down in old books, et cetera. As I mentioned, I chose to exclude electronic resources, ebooks, and e-resources. I also chose to exclude programs, kits, and donations. Programs and kits a little bit ambiguous, like I mentioned, so it's hard to define what would really be encompassed and what was purchased and goes to. Donations is a little bit tricky. It actually is an offset because we are giving them to someone else. It's not considered emissions. However, the term offset gets a little bit tricky when you're using it because it has to be carbon offsets are very well regulated. So for simplicity donations, I consider neutral and exclusion. Table 2 is where I condensed everything. So where we saw adult books, youth books, and teen books in there somewhere. Is a separate category. Music scores, video games, online movies, and audiobooks. I used a life cycle assessment software called Earthster to provide the emission factors for each of these categories. Using that software, I was able to come to a total emissions for this category of 23.88 metric tons of CO2. And this is the common unit, the standard unit of emissions, metric tons of CO2. The other category, category 9, downstream transportation and distribution. For simplicity, I split these into 4 delivery methods: in state, out of state less than 5 pounds, out of state greater than 5 pounds, and home delivery. I also specified the service provided here as the method of transportation and the distance contribute to the overall emissions. Rails, USPS, UPS, and then always. The first component for in-state loans. If you'd like, I included some of the numbers here if you'd like to run through them. In summary, I used a fuel-based approach, which means that I wanted to calculate the fuel combusted in delivery of our items from the sorting facility to the library and back. And then using that fuel combusted, applying an emission factor and getting the total emissions. Up above, I have some of the details on how I got to that fuel combustion. I used the greenhouse gas protocol transport tool, which is the gold standard for the framework. This provided the emission factor of 8.78 kilograms CO2 per US gallon. Multiply the gallons by the emission factor, and you get the total in-state load emissions, 879 metric tons. You recall on 2 slides ago, I split out of state into 2 components, greater than and less than 5 pounds, and that's because we use USPS and UPS. However, I decided to combine these due to the reasonable similarity in their emissions rate here. On the right, you can see that we loaned to out-of-state libraries 2,700 items in 2024, whereas we loaned out 748, but then we have to return them to out-of-state libraries. So I think both of those, the total there is about 3,500. I think it speaks volumes that the number on the left is right. From USPS, one part email flat rate envelope is about $11 multiplied by the total number of items we shipped, about 38 grand. This is using a cost-based approach. So it's using a dollar amount multiplied by emission factor to get an emissions. So this was provided by the Earthster software that I mentioned before, life cycle assessment software, to get the total emissions in this component to 6 metric tons. want to point out here, doing a quick comparison between the in-state and the out-of-state loans. You can see that the in-state items are the majority of the items that we ship. I think it's actually more drastic than this. This is kind of a conservative estimate from my experience in circulation. It's actually quite a bit more. So the difference between those two, I think, is even more drastic. But point is here that the in-state emissions contribute 60%, the out-of-state are still contributing 41%, even though the item count is only 5%. And a quick summary of how I got that 63 grand estimate. The last component of category 9, we have home delivery. This one I decided to consider negligible due to the limited frequency, small item volume, and short distances in comparison with the other in-state and out-of-state components. So this is the emissions summary. Purchase goods and services, that first category comes to 23.88. Downstream transportation distribution comes to 14.79 metric tons of CO2. Probably thinking these are numbers on a slide, they don't actually mean anything. So what does this tell us? So this is a portion of the library's emission profile. Again, this was only 2 categories out of 15. And that's only one of the scopes of 3. It's a portion of the total emissions profile, but it's a meaningful foundation to build off. This is somewhat of a baseline. Then track changes made over time. Use this for future planning or purchasing decisions. You can also use it as a model for community education and transparency. I'll also be working with the sustainability committee here to identify maybe some next steps that we can take to incorporate sustainability practices in our operations. And as I said, it can be a starting point if in the future we'd like to understand if we Any questions? Yes.
Were there any surprises? If you could have anticipated the outcomes?
I thought it was so interesting that in-state versus out-of-state, how different those were. I mean, it was 5% to 95%, and I think actually it's quite, it might be even 98% to 2 or something like that. Yet the out-of-state emissions contributed 40%. So that was one thing that was surprising. I wanted to especially highlight that with you guys. Yes.
Nice job. I noticed you mentioned early on that you excluded the electronic downloads.
Yes.
Sometimes like there's a lot in the news about like ChatGPT and the emissions for each query.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to do electronic downloads, did you think about how you would go about it, or is there just some equation out there that?
Yes, I think you would have to look into specific emission factors that, I mean, the physical use of a laptop or e-reader, whatever you're using, the upstream emissions associated with that, how that was produced, as well as the downstream, how you are disposing of it, would all have to be taken into account. I'd probably use the help of some software, some research to do that. One thing I didn't mention is that it's often simplistic, or I don't want to say easier because it wasn't easy, but limit the scope for the first time that you're doing a report like this. And then as you get better data, or you put more resources into doing it, and you can get more accurate, reliable data, improve your methodology. You just want to make sure it's comparable to what you originally did. So make careful detail of the methodology and emission factors that you used.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. This is wonderful information to have. How prevalent is this conversation within the Illinois library system? Is this data that other libraries are tracking?
Not very prevalent in Illinois, or I would say US libraries. are not doing as much sustainability reporting. It's much more common in large corporations that have to due to legislation. Universities and municipalities are also starting to sustainability reporting. I'm actually on the North Sustain that conversation. But to answer your question, no, not terribly prevalent right now.
So you're a trailblazer. Here.
Try to be.
Great.
On the cusp.
Wonderful.
I was going to add on top of that, as I read your report, which was very good, and you had mentioned, the library could consider releasing an annual sustainability report. Where I took that was, I thought, as we're trailblazers, has there been any thought to, reshaping this into a library event? And by that, I mean, using the library itself as the educational tool to teach about emissions and carbon footprints. I know the library has coordinated and hosted sustainability events, and wouldn't it be cool to, that, you know, the topic of the event is library? Yeah, I mean, you
Like
know,
do a patron program for people to come and learn about
yeah,
what we're doing.
what we're doing, and
what our
I think
baseline
it's
is.
such a great way to learn when you have an, you know, an actual building with books, and you could even incorporate, you know, you can see all these books are going out and now they're all coming in. And have you ever thought about the emissions involved when we put them in the truck and they have to go? I mean, it's sort of built in, and it
Mhm.
sounds like not a lot of libraries are doing
I don't know of any. I'm sure there's probably
it.
one.
So I'm making more work for you. Could you perhaps lead it?
You know, Katie mentioned, I mean, Katie mentioned something when we were going over her report that I thought was so great and is much bigger, it would be a much bigger undertaking than what we can just do here. But that is, wouldn't it be great if patrons, when they were putting an item on hold, they could say, I don't need this right away. I can wait until whatever copy is at Northbrook comes back. Because right now, what happens is you put the book on hold, and if there's another copy available in the system, it's going to send it. Now, sometimes you need that right away, but sometimes you might be like, I don't mind waiting a week. I don't mind, you know, waiting a week and a half. And that's something that would require our ILS vendor to add that in. But these are the types of things that with this data, we can now say, hey, this would be the impact we would be able to have. And so I think having this baseline will just help us to start being able to have some of those conversations. But I think that's just one of the ideas that I'm like, oh yeah, that would be, I mean, I would be willing to wait, as I'm sure many people would.
Sure.
When it talks about out-of-state loans, how are we sending books to California? I mean, is it like it's across country?
Yeah, so OCLC is the company and also the software that we use to share items. It's technically across the globe. We very rarely do overseas sharing. And so depending on, we have a very deep multimedia collection. So we often get requests for movies and videos, Blu-ray. And so with that, anyone that puts it in, it kind of has its own search, its own hold algorithm. So it'll be like, hey, Northbrook is the first one on the list. So it's first going to ask Northbrook. And if we say, oh no, we're not going to send that, or our copy isn't available, then it'll go to the next one on the list. And so sometimes there's 1,000 places that have it, but sometimes there's only like 2. And so, yes, we absolutely do send and receive stuff from all over the country. We try to do as much as possible in state, which you can see in that. So we take every avenue to try and get to that first before we go to OCLC. Which is why we joined, like why we're in a consortium, why we joined Find More Illinois, which connects more libraries and it's all in state. And even when we're looking in OCLC, we'll first look to see if there are any libraries within Illinois before looking outside the state. But I would say, I mean, Anna might have a better sense than I do of the number of items that we ship out each week or each month.
I have the totals for 2024.
Yeah. Because the in-state OCLC ones, are shipped through the delivery service. It's only the 3,500 that are.
I would have to look at
Yeah,
the.
we can, I mean,
I
Katie,
don't know.
yeah. So, Adam, did that?
It did.
And-
It was new information that we were shipping books across the country.
Yeah, and receiving them. So if you are interested in something that we don't have, we'll try to get it for you in state, but if we need to go to California, we'll go to California.
Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Katie.
you.
Thanks, Katie. I do have a few other updates under my report. I wanted to, this is very, very important. I wanted to mention I'm taking a couple long weekends in August. So August 7th and 8th and 14th and 15th, I will be out of office. Kelly will be here for part of them.
I will be here the 14th. and
Yes,
15th.
the 14th and 15th. And so we will have coverage during all the times. I also wanted to just mention that summer reading continues. If you have not yet turned in your summer reading log, there's still plenty of time, so no worries. But we are continuing to experience really high numbers. In looking at the numbers today, we are at about 40% finishing rate right now. We usually end between 50 and 60%. So we're right on target with where we hope to be. We are seeing higher numbers. This is the third year in a row that we're continuing to see higher numbers of our adult summer reading program participants. I attribute much of that to Stacy and her bucket hat. And so that I think is wonderful. And so this has been a great summer, and we're continuing to see, of course, this is our busiest time of the year. We're continuing to see that in our checkouts and program attendance, and lots of happy smiling faces in the library, and sometimes sad faces when people have to leave. So, which is interesting. In other not quite as fun news, I did want to also just give everyone a little bit more of an IMLS update. As you know, the federal budget bill was passed and signed. That did eliminate all funding for the Institute for Museum and Library Services. And the American Library Association is still in a last-ditch effort to try and get some funding back. Is calling on everyone to reach out to your congresspeople to sign the Dear Appropriator letters and recertify IMLS for funding for the next decade. Even though it would mean that we wouldn't get funding in this next year, it would mean that we would have the potential to get funding again in the future. If that is not signed, this happens every decade. If those are not signed, if that isn't reinstituted, then IMLS would essentially become defunct. All of our legislators have already signed the letter. You are still welcome to reach out to them, but I want you to know that every single one of our state reps, of our House of Representatives, as well as the Senate, have signed the letters and are very much strong library supporters. So they are on top of it. But if you know people in other states, please encourage them to reach out. We are still awaiting a ruling on the court case around that 21 different state attorney generals have lodged to get our funding for this year. So that we are hoping to hear in October. We'll see what happens. So that will likely not have any big news until then. But we are hopeful that we will at least get something this year. And I don't have anything else positive to say about IMLS right now. So I'm just going to move on and mention one other thing, which is that as we had talked about the last couple of months, we are still working, Kelly is still working with the Park District on an IGA. This, of course, is their busiest time of the year as well. They do a little thing, one or two things on the 4th of July. So we are still waiting to hear back from them. And while we had hoped to bring something in August, it might be delayed until September, but we will continue to work with them and we will bring something big so we can enter into a partnership more. And that is everything I wanted to mention, but I'm happy to answer any questions on any other parts of my report.
I think certainly on my own behalf, I'm going to state for the record, this is appalling, destructive, and hugely detrimental.
I assume you're talking about IMLS and not the Park District.
That is correct.
Ended on one topic,
Yes.
she's
Nope,
going
nope,
back.
that's
I
fair.
wanted
That's
the
totally
record to
fair.
show what was happening.
That's totally fair.
To libraries everywhere and the other types of agencies that IMLS should not be happening.
So Katie's wonderful report that we just saw talks about the value of in-state delivery and how much that helps with not having to send stuff through UPS or the post office. One of the main sources of funding for the library systems comes from the state. Well, the only money they get is from the state library. The state library money comes from state funds as well as federal funds. So this has the potential, granted, probably not in the next year, but if this does go away, that will create a hole in the state budget. And that will mean that, it could mean, we have eventually only 3 days a week of delivery. Or it might mean that we have to pay a portion. We currently pay $0 for any item that we share with another library or we get for another person. And so that has the potential to be a huge impact. And we're a library that could afford to pay for part of it. There are many libraries that means that their patrons wouldn't have access to all of that information.
We, in this room, there was a town hall meeting with 3 of our state representatives. And among other things, they made it quite clear that with the best will in the world, the state cannot plug these holes that are being created, among them IMLS, but other types as well. And it's going to create a great deal of destruction, pain, and suffering.
That said, do you expect that you'll have to increase your kind of like your physical collection because you're not able to lean on, if it went away, the
That's an interesting
interlibrary
question.
loaning?
So back in the 80s, when it was not quite as easy to share items, you couldn't just put a hold on a computer, right? You just got used to this is what exists. We have 250,000 physical items here. Certainly looking at increasing those is a possibility, but we also have a fixed amount of space. So unless we say like, well, we don't need a meeting room, we can fill it with books, which I don't think any of us would suggest. So I don't know that we would necessarily look to do that, but we would likely look to first towards patron education, to explaining why this isn't possible. And in offsetting that with like, if we wanted to increase our digital books, the pricing for the digital books is so outrageously high compared to what a consumer pays, that would be difficult. We already pay, anywhere from 6 to 8 times more for a digital book than you would pay if you bought it independently. So that wouldn't require more space, but it does require significantly more money. So there isn't a quick, easy fix for any of this. And we will, as we always do, continue to focus on taking the money that the taxpayers entrust to us and providing the materials, programs, and resources that they desire. But there isn't well, we can fix it. There will be ramifications, and there are ramifications that we might not see for a few years. It's not like an immediate, they're shutting off the water and the electricity. It would be more of a slow, I guess, putting like a frog in water and trying to heat up slowly. No, that's not a great analogy.
I think there is potential for how we're spending our materials budget to be impacted. Like we do make decisions about how many copies of bestsellers to buy based on the fact that we can easily interlibrary loan. And so I could see that shifting sooner rather than later if we lost delivery, that we would be putting more money toward multiple copies of high demand items. And that would then shift for our selectors, how often they needed to be in the collections, weeding materials. It would impact the Friends if we were having more materials that we were pulling out of circulation so that we could be fulfilling holds. I could see that happening in the shorter term. I also think that our state is pretty scrappy and resilient, and I think that there's going to be a lot of different options that we're going to be looking at in the next couple of years for delivery. And that might be coming to the board as well. So how Rails is supporting us, or if it's not Rails, what else is happening? I hope it's Rails, but
Right, agreed.
but so that could be coming down the pike as well.
The good news for this year is that the Secretary of State has found the $5 million that we typically get federally from within his budget that he's reallocated for libraries, so that there will not be a deficit this year for libraries in Illinois from the money that is received from the state. But that's as you know, Janet was saying, that's a stopgap. That's a 1-year thing. That's not a permanent fix.
I would also mention that while all of our state legislators have signed on to the Dear Appropriator letter, it is still appropriate to email them to thank them for that and to note that you saw that, because those constituent comments help them set their priorities for future years. And so if this just happens and we take for granted that it happened, it makes it harder for them in the future to justify doing that kind of support. And people don't send them enough nice emails, honestly.
Yeah.
So tell Brad, thank you.
Yeah. And Jan Schakowsky, because we have a dual in
Brad is mine. The rest of you can do change. Any other questions for Kate? Okay, moving into board member reports.
Well, I headed for the outdoor story time on June 20th, which was turned into indoor story time due to the weather, but it was fabulous. It was jam-packed, and Sean and Jason did an incredible job getting everybody up and moving, and I enjoyed every minute of it, especially the bubbles.
Bubbles are just fun.
They are.
Took my dad to the Beatles movie presentation. It was in this room, and he was very excited because the presenter, I guess, is like a quasi well-known radio host of Beatles like trivia. I'm not really sure. But anyway, went really well, and they did a good job with the media here, and it was a packed room, and everyone seemed to really enjoy it.
Okay, moving into unfinished business. We have an update on the room rental policy review working. That's a lot of work.
I know. It is a lot of words.
Okay, we have an update.
Yeah, on the room rental policy review working group.
Got it.
I can finally say it without pausing. I came up with the name, and then it just, I haven't changed it, and now it's too late. So last night we had the first meeting. We had Janet and Maura, as well as 3 staff members, Tracy Gossage, Diane Reed, and Dahlia Shapiro, who all volunteered, as well as what were supposed to be 7, but ended up being 5 community members. We had one person call off sick. And so we started off by everyone introduced themselves and talked about why they wanted, why they volunteered to be part of this. And then we worked on creating a shared understanding of what the work that we were going to be doing would be. Biz Lindsay Ryan, as our facilitator, did a great job of keeping everyone on track and focused on the ultimate goal of creating something that will be workable. She created what I thought was a really great framework about how to approach policies, which is that there's the policy creation, but then you also have to consider what the messaging then needs to be and what the enforcement looks like. And if you don't consider all 3 of those parts, you can write a beautiful policy that is impossible to enforce, or is too cumbersome to message, or that it's too hard for staff to explain to people. Then you haven't written a good policy, you haven't created something. So getting everyone to see it at those different levels, people had opportunities to talk in small groups as well as in the larger group about the things that they felt were important. I'm there was a lot of talk about the importance of the First Amendment. There was a lot of talk about the importance of safety, as well as the opportunity to, like, what the library's core mission is and how do we uphold that mission with this policy. And so by the end of the meeting, we weren't looking at the policy yet, but we did define what the focus is and what we are going to be working on together. So I'm now going to be sharing the policy as well as some sample policies from other libraries, along with the list of questions that we brainstormed that we want to use to inform how we're going to be looking at it. And then at the next meeting on August 20th, we will dive into the meat of it and be able to get through looking at the policies. One of the things that Biz did a really good job of was talking about what responsibility this group has, what responsibility the board has, what responsibilities the staff has, that, you know, reminding them that ultimately it's the board who is deciding policy, but that they seek feedback, and this group is meant to give feedback, and that ultimately the staff are in charge of taking it and making the procedures and implementing the policy that is approved. But again, feedback that we receive from this will be helpful in helping us make procedures that have fewer barriers and make it easier to understand. And so I think everyone is coming into it with the right mindset of what their role is. And I felt like there was already some really great discussions. And so I'm going to pause. I tried to give like a really summary, but of course, Janet and Maura were there and might have more to add.
I think you did a very good job summarizing. Mara, do you want to?
I would say that what my takeaway, I thought Biz did a fantastic job of moderating the discussions and bringing people back on track and making sure that we were checking back in on what our legal parameters were. And so I was very impressed with the way the meeting was facilitated. And also just reminding us about the difference that we are writing a policy and we are not writing procedure. And so I think that's something that as board members, we always have to keep in mind, but it was helpful for this specific topic as well. And then when we went through our mission statement for the library, everything sort of, you could see it clearly aligned and you could kind of say, well, that's not a problem talking about a room rental policy. That's not the only place where you get kind of this little like kind of pause, not a hiccup or anything, but just a pause is how do you make it welcoming for all? So part of our mission statement includes that, and just sort of keeping that in the forefront. It is
It's
part of our mission
welcoming
statement.
in the eye of the beholder. So, you know, maybe a pain point there is a tension point there. I valued the opportunity, did a few turn and talks with smaller groups, giving me the chance to get to know at least a small subset of the group better. And we talked about things like, you know, what do you already know about this process? What are your hopes for this group? What are your concerns about our current policy? And what do you need to know that you don't already know? So that I think facilitated some useful conversation. And I think I thought of it as level setting. And I think that's really what you've been saying is just, I think one of the goals, and I think we achieved this, was everyone sort of having a common understanding of where are the legal lines, where are the ethical lines. She talked about it needs to be legal. It needs to be ethical, because it might be legal, but ethical might be a wider scope. And her word for it was it needs to be good, which by that she meant you can administer. Something that isn't so difficult and clunky that it takes the staff days and days to go through the 45-page application for a row. So it because you're so busy putting all the ethics in, and so those were goals that Biz talked about, and I think I thought we wrapped up where in a good place. I did feel a little like, that's a lot. I don't know if we're going to get it all done in one session. That was my only concern.
Yeah, great. I think we assembled a great group.
Good group. Yeah, folks. Definitely.
a lot of different viewpoints.
But very, very respectful.
Very much.
Any questions?
No.
Thanks, Maura and Janet, for contributing.
How does it look process wise for the rest of the board? I mean, what is like the deliverable outcome of the meetings and then how will it be conveyed to?
So after the meeting in August, the next step will be that Julie Tappender, our attorney, and I will take all of the feedback and everything that was said. I don't ever think that wordsmithing in a group is ever a good idea. That generally doesn't end well. So we will take all of that feedback and we will then update the existing policy. And then my intent is then to bring that, to share that with the group again. And so that then after the group's seen it, like, okay, yeah, this is what, you understood what we were talking about. This feels good. It's legal, it's ethical, it's good. It is in line with our mission, vision, and values. At that point then, which the hope is at the September board meeting, bringing it before the board, presenting it to all of you to look at and either vote on or ask for, more tweaks or changes or more information, and then move forward with then implementing that by updating all of our procedures, which we'll likely be doing some of that as we're working on the policy too, because we've already gotten some good feedback on that about things that we can do. And our staff have some good ideas too, that would make it easier for patrons, easier for staff, clearer. So the goal is that, which is a little ambitious, that by October, we would have things that the policy would be approved and we would be looking at implementing in October. Those are the next steps. The current timeline provided that things all go as planned.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for the update. That's helpful. Moving into new business, we are going to briefly recess the meeting and take a field trip because the Friends of the Library sale preview is actually happening right now. So we are going to go visit the sale and then bring Meryl back with us for an update on the Friends of the Library and all that they are doing. So Erin, you can stop our recording. Welcome back, everyone. We are joined by Meryl from the Friends of the Library, who's going to talk to us about the Friends and the work they do.
We put the form, yes.
Okay, so in your folder, you should have a document that Kate prepared for us.
It's in her book. She won't say that.
I'm not.
Prepared and gave this to the board of the Friends of the Library. And this helped us understand the differences between the library administration, board of trustees, the foundation, which I think is really under the administration, and then the Friends of the Library. So we could easily see our lanes in which we operate and how we work together. For example, on fiscal responsibility, library director and administration will prepare a budget which the board of trustees approves. The way the Friends works along that line is that we raise funds. Thank you to those of you who helped raise funds tonight. And as I explained, all of the books that we receive, either that were removed from the library collection or were donated to us, go into our bookshop or the book sale, and whatever funds we raise gets rolled over into library programs. And each winter timeframe, Kelly comes to us with an idea of what the budget is going to be like for the coming year. However, there are programs that are continuing that we just automatically renew. For example, the reading summer and winter reading programs, the fine arts fall, the movie programs, and youth services changes from year to year, but basically it's a bucket or a diversified basket of programs that they decide on from year to year. We also support some of the book discussion leaders. So those are continuing, and yeah, we'll do this and this and this and this again. And then if there is something else in particular that the administration is seeking funding for, then we consider that. So for example, the monitor, I think it's in conference room 12.
Yeah. Study room
Large
12.
size monitor to assist with meetings that go on in that particular conference room. And 2 years ago and this year, we will be co-sponsoring the speaker for One Book, One North book. And
Every year you cover the cost for the fish tank maintenance.
yes, the fish tank maintenance is an ongoing expense that we automatically keep in our budget. So over the last few years, our response to the library budget has been rather simple and straightforward because we know we're already going to continue to fund A, B, C, D, E, and F. And so really, it's only if Kelly comes to us with something else. And that may happen during the budgeting process, or it might happen in July. We don't know, and honestly, it doesn't matter to us because we do have a reserve that we are ready to use. A couple of larger expenditures that the Friends have funded include the lift that goes into the auditorium, the display case in the hallway where you can see the library of things, that wooden display case, we paid for that. And whether
Tremendous amounts of digitizing when we've been trying to, over the last, I would say 15 years, digitize a lot of the newspapers, things that are very Northbrook specific. Friends have helped fund.
so that's how we align with the trustees and with the administration on fiscal responsibilities. And in terms of policy, that's been a discussion item for the Friends of the Library over the last few years, as more districts have experienced a book banning or requests for book banning or cutting back on library funding. We recently had a discussion about that. And our position as a board has been to support the administration of the library and advocate for their position within the community if we are able to do so. We are fully a volunteer organization. So if you would like, you're more than welcome to be a volunteer in the Friends of the Bookshop or with the Friends, or if you have friends of your own who are looking for an opportunity to be surrounded by books. We would love to talk to them about opportunities in the bookshop. After the pandemic, the COVID and the library fully reopened, Kate persuaded us to open up full-time on an honor system. So we are open the same hours as the library, even though we may not have a volunteer in the bookshop. And our receipts have almost doubled because we find that there are probably a lot of people who come in the evening and they buy some books and they're not going to get change because there's no volunteer. Oh, goes to the library. So we've done very well with that, and it has helped us move books, which is good because the community has increasingly been donating books to the library. So by handling all of those community donations, Kate does not have to have a person on staff to do that job.
It's a couple thousand a month. So it's a significant amount.
Books.
Of books.
Thousand books.
Yeah, a couple thousand books a month that we get donated, that the friends navigate for us and go through.
Meryl, will you talk a little bit about membership? How one becomes a member and how that supports the Friends?
Yes, in addition to the book sales and the bookshop, which is our primary fundraiser for the library, we also have members. And this has been going on for many, many years. It's kind of like being a member of WTTW, you know, public television or public radio, whatever. You join and become a member for as little as $10 a year. And when I first became a volunteer, I said, well, what do I get for this? Well, get a good feeling. And that wasn't really what I had in mind. Then we started in our thank you note, thank you for becoming a member. Now you get a coupon for a free book. And then this, I think the last two book sales ago, we started this member preview night. And that very first one, we had more than 5 people. And now tonight we had people lined up at 6:30. So it appears to be something that our members appreciate, being able to look, being able to come at night before the booksellers, resellers come tomorrow morning and vacuuming, which is good. I mean, there are resellers that come to us, they perform a really good service. And I understand that members of the community might be put off by having resellers grab books and books and books and put them in boxes and bags. The reality is those resellers probably in total buy more books than members of the community do. So those resellers, many or most of whom don't live in Northbrook, are contributing directly to the programs in the Northbrook Library. So if you happen to hear any feedback from, oh, those nasty book resellers, they were there first thing in the morning and grabbing, well, they perform an important service to us. They remove a lot of books and all of that funding goes right back into your programs.
And Meryl wasn't here, but before Meryl got here, we heard a presentation about sustainability. And one of the things we often say is that the Friends are one of our best recyclers in the library, and they definitely contribute to us being a more sustainable organization because the books that we're removing or books that community members are donating are living another life by the folks who are either purchasing them in the bookshop or getting them from the little free libraries throughout town.
Yes, we do not sell in the bookshop every book that we get. So for example, we don't sell legal textbooks or even academic textbooks or reference books. However, there is a service that was started by a young man who made his way through college by buying books in the bookshop and reselling them. And he now has provided a service to the library called Discover Books.
No, it's
No.
knowledge exchange.
Trevor with the previous,
Knowledge exchange. And so there are some large bins back in tech services, and those academic textbooks, reference books, or other books that really, for whatever reason, don't seem to sell very well in our shop, we'll put into those bins and they get a second life that way. Might not be in the US, might be somewhere else, but they get a second life. There are actually very few books that we have to trash because of condition. So really, it's a very green operation.
question.
Any other questions?
It's always fun to drop off books and find new ones and start.
Welcome you all the time. Come back tomorrow. back Saturday. Saturday afternoon, I'll let you in for a hint. A bag for $5. So keep that in mind. Right?
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Meryl.
Say no.
May you
And I'll
for
for
the
the
opportunity.
opportunity. Thank you. Maybe next meeting we should have scheduled the same night as our book sale.
That's right.
I like that.
Okay, anyway, okay, moving on to,
Stacy knows someone famous.
I know lots. Author, you. I also know a national talk show host that I went to high school with. And anyway, okay, moving on. Data analysis, ongoing support, Kate.
Okay, so I included a memo. There's no, just to be clear, there's no decision making being asked for tonight. I wanted to just share some ideas with the board. And so one of the things that I think everyone is aware, we've been working with Mallory Edgar for the last year, and she's put together our data dashboard. Through that process, we have identified a number of other things that would be really useful to do from a data analysis and data visualization perspective. One of the things in, of course, the strategic plan is that we're making data-driven decisions, and this is something that I think many of us on staff have great passion for, but in order to do this effectively, it's difficult to find the time to do it. I always think it'll take, like, this will only take 5 minutes, and that's just a lie. So we talked with Mallory when we wrapped up the data project, and she had shared with us the list of all of the different projects that we have. One of the things that we want to do is to be able to create a more detailed dashboard specifically correlated to each strategic plan goal. One of the things that this dashboard does is it is there, that information is there, but it doesn't directly correlate to those. We also, I have, and Linda and I have talked about this for years, we have long wanted to have an annual report that we can share with the community, much like the Park District does, and there just has never been time for that. We also recognize that one of our big areas of asking with our strategic plan is going to be collecting and analyzing data from patrons. And while we do have our feedback form and patron comments and our program surveys, we do a good job gathering. We don't often have the time to do the deep analysis that will help us really evaluate outcomes. So there is one proposal in the packet that Mallory has provided. I wanted to also just share a couple other proposals that she had suggested to us, some of which Kelly and I were like, no, I'm not even going to bring it to the board, but I'm going to just share it just so you guys are all aware. So one of her first proposal was for $6,000 a month that we would have 3 dedicated days a week where she would be working for us on all of these projects that we have outlined, and we would prioritize the projects, and that she would also be available for more spontaneous data analysis needs. So if a staff member had a need for analyzing something or putting something together, she would be dedicated to us and able to do that. We told her that that was not possible fiscally. And so she came back with this option, which I presented now for the $4,000 a month, which will again give us dedicated time with Mallory, 2 days a week, and then other times as needed, and allow us to work with her and have that time kind of set aside for us from our other projects. We also, though, can go and do things project by project, much like we did for the data dashboard. So that is another option. It wasn't in this proposal, but that is something that if the board feels like that is a route that you would prefer to go in, I can come back with that more fleshed out for you. The final option is that we could hire Mallory on just an hourly rate. That wouldn't give us the ability to have her for dedicated times for us. So that means then that we're kind of at the bottom of the queue for things. But if we have things that needed doing and didn't have a grand, huge timeline or time crunch, that would be another option for us as well. And so one of the things that we've already discovered, I know we've only had the data dashboard for the board for a couple months, but just the streamlining of the data itself and making that easier for us to gather has already proven helpful. And I've been using it, maybe not daily, but multiple times a week now, just to get easier snapshots, which has certainly helped with how, if you just need a quick snapshot, you're not spending time trying to put that all together. I also want to, because one of the pieces of feedback that the board helpfully gave during my eval was that you would like to see more options presented. And I mean, it was like, it would be very difficult to start with a new vendor with this. We certainly could do that, but because Mallory now has done such a deep dive into how our data works, that is why I'm only bringing you one vendor. Stacy helpfully pointed out, though, that we can present multiple options, which is what I just shared with you tonight. So one of the things that I think it's important to think about, though, we had a very clear outline of what we wanted to accomplish with the data dashboard. We knew what the end product was. This is, of course, a little bit squishier because it doesn't have that exact, like, what is the deliverable? There will certainly be deliverables. And Kelly and I, when we met with Mallory, did talk about that, about how would we gauge the effectiveness of this. One of the things that has been really great about working with Mallory is her high attention to detail and our ability to talk to her about what is going well, things that we need done differently. A great example of that is with the accessibility of the Looker Studio site. She had done some things, but she and Kelly and Linda and I met, and she's now adding in more alt text and changing some of the font colors to give better readability for things. And so that was something that we said we needed more on, and she has been able to work with Linda and provide that for us. So in terms of the overall outcomes, what my approach would be to have these ongoing support meetings like we did during the data dashboard, and have for each project outlined what outcomes we expect, and then go back and revisit those during each piece. And of course, then for more of the off the cuff stuff, we would want to be having quarterly check-ins where we can check in and see how those are going and what benefit. I think it's also important to note that while Kelly and I have been the main contacts with Mallory, we would invite other members of the management team to work more closely with her, like Kim and Susan did. And so that would be another area where I would seek input from them on the effectiveness of the work with Mallory. While I do believe that this would be very beneficial, I also recognize that this is a new thing. And so I do think that when you are starting something new like this, it is better to have stronger and more thoughtful reporting on how it is going, so that you can make sure that the money being spent is worth it. So this would be something that I would be more than happy to provide additional updates to the board with, if we do end up moving forward with any of these options. And if there's specific things that you guys would like to see, I will of course be doing my own accounting with that as well. I do think that this is something that for us to be able to successfully implement the strategic plan, we do need additional data support. If none of these options feel like an option we want to go down, of course we can look at other options, but I'm going to stop talking and let you ask some questions and see kind of what thoughts the board has, so that we can either gather more information, adjust proposals, bring Mallory in to talk more, to see what our next steps would be. I did that without slides. It was very challenging.
I think you're up to 4 now.
A handful of thoughts.
Go ahead.
Okay, I had a handful of thoughts, just like working with consultants, and I think you hit the nail on the head, which is how are we tracking what her hours look like? I mean, a lot of consultants and anybody who works like in professional services, you do have to dig an hourly description of what the work you did, and it can be high level, but just like worked on XYZ project. And I don't know if that looks like on a weekly basis or just at the end of the month, but it's important, especially if it's like a flat fee per month, to know exactly like what time is being spent on what and how many hours it adds up to, so you can make an informed decision about the flat rate versus an hourly in the long term. And then, yeah, just it would have to be really close oversight about what her specific tasks are for the month. And that obviously requires more resources on the staff's part. Okay, a couple more thoughts. One was to be mindful of the transition of the work if we move away from her as a vendor, which you may probably have thought of with respect to the dashboard, but it should be important that like whatever deliverable she gives us can, if we, transition her off the project, you guys can work on it. This may be a minor point, but I noticed it in her proposal about auto renewal for the term. It was 2 auto renewals without an opt-out. And, I would suggest just do it if you move forward like a 12-month term and then revisit at the end to see how things are going. So that's all great.
I reviewed the proposal, and at the end, it was very difficult for me to understand deliverables. I found most of it very vague. I mean, you're going to spend almost $50,000 on a consulting contract. I really could not understand what really in specific deliverable terms we were really going to be getting. Revised or newly developed tools for various data entry. What does that mean? Google Forms, Google Sheets. Do what? Data communication tools, reports, infographics. Do we need a consultant to do those sorts of things? I was going through it trying to understand what specifically would be worth $4,000 a month, and I just found it. I could not figure out specifically and clearly what the deliverables were. I thought having a consultant on retainer for $4,000 a month, kind of in case we need her, didn't seem worth it to me. Now, I don't believe that's what you really think, but I couldn't find in here 2 surveys administered in April and March, or these 4 tools. That exploration of opportunities for ongoing feedback gathering. What kind of ongoing feedback gathering? When? What form would that take? What are our goals in gathering that feedback? What are we trying to learn? So I guess I struggled to understand specifically what we'd be getting for $4,000 a month. And I wasn't particularly convinced by this that we needed to spend that kind of money. I could be convinced if I saw
More of like the project plan.
yeah, what is the project plan for this? I agree that I didn't think an auto renewal was appropriate.
Yeah, I agree. And this was the pre-edited, like,
Sure.
We take out auto renewals. I hate them
Yeah.
because I think that they,
Definitely. So those are, when I wrote at the top, this is a sort of a kitchen sink proposal with vague, undefined deliverables. And there was nothing that convinced me here we needed this. Just to say we don't. I just would need to see a lot more heft to it before I would consider it worth the money.
I think I'd like to see a revised proposal both from you and then something in response from Mallory of what are the problems we're trying to solve. And then Mallory responding with, here's the hours that would take. Here's how much you would pay if we go over that number of hours. And that way we could do this more like a Panera you pick 2 menu of these are the projects we want to prioritize. And if it makes sense to go into a 6-month or 12-month contract, we have that information available to us. If it makes more sense to go into a project-based contract, that would be answered by this. But right now, this is, to use your word, this is a squishy problem and we're trying to put it in a box that doesn't have any give. And either we're going to underfill the box and overpay, or we're going to overfill the box and then we won't have solved any problems at all. That I do never want to use the word squishy.
What's the priority for this and what are we not funding and what's the community benefit? I think that the dashboard is something we're just getting used to and that it's provided information, and as we're learning how to use that information, it's becoming a part of what we look for. I'm not convinced that I agree with Janet. It's squishy and I would have a hard time unless it's a project based. If this is, we want them something like that, fine, then hire her to do that. I would be really reluctant to have somebody on that kind of financial basis. And what else could we do with that $4,000 a month that would benefit what's in the strategic plan and the community?
I think to Bryce's point about tracking hours, like I can't conceptualize how Mallory spends 16 hours, right? If we're talking about 2 days a week, I don't know what that means in terms of productivity and output and what we get for that. And I think that's part of what's missing here is what is Mallory's work style and what can we expect for 16 hours a week times 4 weeks times 50, I would assume 51 weeks, but like, what does that actually look like in terms of what we get back at the end of this? And I think that part is missing in terms of her saying, these are your projects, here's what I can prioritize.
I guess it depends on what you, Kate, and Kelly, and Becky feel are the priorities. Is there a special project that is a high priority, or are we looking to find projects?
Oh, that's a good
And
point.
if you have a specific priority, then let's address that and how to take care of whoever is going to address the need. But I think this kind of open-ended and we'll find things. I think I'd like to know specifically. And I think it would be a rate per project rather than hours. I don't think you can sit and say, I went to the bathroom and had water and a cup of coffee. So
I think
just
Barbara
like
makes a very good point with that. I think, what is your highest need for data? By all means, let's bring Mallory in to help you address that need. So prioritize.
Do you anticipate she'll be coming in this group as well, or like
With the board?
like to do if she does an updated proposal, or is it?
Oh, yeah, I was gonna see what the board would like, depending on how this went. I think that it is helpful for her to be here to answer more direct questions. Like that was not, I didn't bring her in for this initial, but yes, short answer, yes.
I just had one more thing. I agree with what everything everyone has said. I would love to get a sense of projects broken down in terms of data visualization and data efficiency. And what I mean by that is how many personnel hours are spent on what is at the lower end of everyone's license of punching numbers into a computer versus letting the data, letting the tools make them more efficient so their focus can be on serving the community.
So for instance, with the data dashboard, so what I'm hearing you say is like, we have streamlined how we're collecting data and automated it wherever possible so that we don't have people duplicating data, which leads to more errors. We also have fewer people actually inputting the data. We're collecting and using the raw data because now it can be more automatically cleaned. And so that has led to us being able to greatly reduce the amount of staff time across the library that is being spent just data entry. We collect a lot of data currently that we didn't don't do anything with. So I think that's the data viz piece. That also, we just don't have, staff don't have the capacity, and many of them don't have the training to be able to take that data and make it into something usable. Like people are like, oh, we have all this data. The data is useless unless you're actually using it and unless it's in a format that can help you make good decisions. Kelly's been working on this a lot. I don't know if you have anything you would want to add of that piece.
I think it'd be really interesting to look at the efficiency piece. One thing I would say is there's a lot that we just don't do because we don't have the bandwidth or the knowledge in many cases to do it. So one of the projects that we had talked about is pulling together the IPLAR data in a more streamlined fashion. So the dashboard is getting us there because we have one shared repository for all of the data that we need for the IPLAR, but there still needs to be manipulation of that data to make it fit in to the annual report, the IPLAR report. And we had a conversation with Mallory of like, what does that look like? And it's, 20, 40 hours of creating pivot tables and charts and things that like we just wouldn't do. Like I would just go through and pull it all out by hand, and spend hours and hours working with staff to get all of those numbers to fit into the IPLAR. So that would be the big difference of like, it would be automated by the consultant rather than kind of counted by hand internally with that specific example.
And I think that's an excellent example of the kind of specificity
Yeah.
that, yes, so let's bring her in to do.
Yeah, and we can absolutely provide that level of detail. So what I'm hearing is that a much more detailed project plan of how we'd be using the hours is what the board would like to see. And so we can absolutely bring that back.
And she the best person and the right person. Because if you have a specific project, there may be somebody that can do it for less money in less time. It requires not maybe as high level a skill set as she might bring. But if it's just something that Kelly doesn't have to do by hand, by pulling out information, does that require a Merrill to do it?
I think that is a great question to ask. I think one of the things I would say that we probably spent close to 20 hours, maybe even more, talking about all of our data and having someone understand all of the different buckets. That I think is going to be hard. That would be a steep learning curve. But I think if it's for someone to come in from a data visualization piece, but I think from like Adam was talking about, from the data efficiency piece, and just if you're just taking something and setting up pivot tables, and charts, that could be something that someone else might be able to do. So we can certainly separate those out and look at that.
And maybe this is the plan, but if there's a way to create those tools so that it's the person who's putting that together, then moving forward, if you reference this, you could handle it because now it's there. All you've got to do is drop in some data and it does the calculations for you.
And maybe it's also a matter of training someone in staff to do it, on staff to do it. And maybe it's a cost up front, but that monthly thing that someone else would. No idea, but this is not an area that I know anything about. I just thought that maybe it's something that's different.
I think that is certainly a possibility. I think much like we found with the website, and Linda manages our website, and she's not a web developer. So having, when it's simple stuff and updating, very easy. But then when something weird happens, we have a company that we can call and say, hey, can you spend an hour doing this? So I do think that will likely still be a need that we have, just because this isn't something that, even if we train someone, that they would be spending all day, every day on.
Right.
So what I'm hearing is that it would be helpful. And I have to just say one thing for Bryce is she did a ton of instructions on how everything is put together, which is one of the things that I really appreciate about Mallory, is that she's laid out all of the, like, this is how it was set up and this is how you can update so that it doesn't require her, or if we did need to shift it over. I'm like, yeah. So anyway, sorry. So what I'm hearing from the board though is that more detailed project plan, explaining more of what the different kind of buckets the work falls into and who really would be best to do that and what that might look like. And to find out really what, like, which I think we can easily do, prioritize. I know Kelly and I have talked about this, like we have our top priorities, but identifying that for the board so that you guys are aware of not just within the project plan what there are, but what are the top things that are most important. And that within that, defining what are the issues we're trying to solve and what is the ultimate benefit to the library.
And linked into the strategic plan,
Yes, absolutely.
like a
Just-
broken record here.
No, I mean, it has to be, right? Does that capture? I just want to make sure I've captured
I think
what.
it does. I heard you on saying you need data to support strategic plan implementation. And it is mentioned in here, of course. Along those lines, like which pieces, like this part of the strategic plan, we sure could use some data on.
Mhm.
This part, we sure could use some data on.
Yeah. I would say over half of our outcomes have data-driven needs
Sure.
that we don't have systems in place for yet. But I'm gonna go through and identify those more
Well, we'll be
specifically.
going through this, right?
Yeah, we will be in a
Yeah.
couple minutes.
Do you feel like you have what you need?
Yes, unless there's anything that I missed in that recap of what. We will talk more in August.
Great. Last week, we took a field trip. That's 2 weeks in a row where we've taken field trips. I've really set the bar high.
You
Last
have.
week, we took a field trip to the Schaumburg Township District Library, and now we're going to chat about that. Do you want me to do this?
Oh, yes.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
So
I'm gonna take detailed notes.
amazing. This is the time where we debrief the field trip, the library part, not the dinner part. If you want to talk about the dinner part, we can do that separately. We all had a great time. What did you like? What impressed you? And other observations?
I thought their teen space was really good. I love the fact that it was a space that could be separated off for both for noise and then also just for the benefit of teens. And 2 teens at home, they like to close doors. So I thought that was a nice addition to it. I thought it was a quiet space for the most part, but also did not feel dead. That it was incredibly active for a very rainy Thursday evening. And it also just sort of emphasized how much work we have to do on our.
Look at that material on the chairs, the vinyl.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was smart,
Mhm.
and attractive and easy to sanitize and keep clean. And I think they did a great job of making it inviting as well. The colors were great. Enjoyed that. And I thought some of the embellishments were a little over the top, like the ceiling, when she was explaining how it was created and fabricated with all of this, I thought to myself, that must have cost a fortune. And
How are they gonna clean it?
really and I had to keep reminding myself that their population is double ours. And the magnitude does not always equal the same. You have to put it, so you're talking about apples and apples. It certainly was impressive. The storage ideas were great. And and the mission statements and some of the stuff was stuff we were going to do anyway. So it was well worth seeing. So thank you.
So I thought they did an amazing job delineating the functions of each of the spaces in a way that made them feel unique in and of themselves, but still part of a cohesive whole. The way that they use seating variety to speak to that was noticeable. And even within the adult areas, there was I'm an adult and want to sit and read a book and, have a place to camp out while my other people are running around, or I'm here to get business done. They had that variety of function. I thought that the booth seating was genius. The use of exhibits to delineate the spaces was really noticeable, and it gave the visual layout of the of each of the sections a hook to build around. The headline signage, the way that they used bright lettering on dark backgrounds made it pop. And the way that the digitization of the use of the spaces is in line with current customer expectations, that I can click on a sign and reserve the room, not I have to go fill out a clipboard and then I need to wait around for me to be able to hear their voice when they say this room is available. And I'm a design geek, so Barbara, when you bring up that ceiling, that was like a cathedral moment for me. I thought that was so beautiful, and it did have an acoustic impact on that space. So I'm always on board with functional and beautiful design.
And easy to be cleaned.
Yeah.
I can't help it. I'm gonna keep working on that.
I would be curious to hear what the designers said about it, if there is a way to do it, or if they find it's not necessary. Yeah.
I talked to Tiffany and Dan when I was there, and Dan's words were, well, we don't have to worry about that. And it's not helpful. So.
Oh, goodness, my notes were like almost the same as what Adam observed, and I really like the teen area setup. I just thought that was really it was nice to see teens hanging out there in groups and using the space kind of like a college union setup, like casual, but they were just in the space. I also this flows throughout it, but I liked the signage overall was really impressive to me, and I liked how they arranged the bookshelves, and even like outside the teen area, they had really clear signage of like this category of book that you would might be interested in, which I thought was really great. I also noted, which you probably may already know, I forget the director's name at the Schaumburg Library, Annie. She had said that they had teen input they have like a couple of teen advisory board members. I'm not really sure, but anyways, I thought that was a really good idea. I know we've got a teen advisory board here to get their feedback, what they would like to see in this space. As far as like the divisions of the seating, I also wrote down booths because I liked the booths a lot, but I also noticed like the carpet designated the different seating areas, right? So it was like a sort of a square, different color. So you could like sort of, even though it was one giant space, it made it feel divided into smaller spaces based on like the coloring of the furniture and carpets. I also really like the digital signage, and I appreciate that, that's a cost for sure, but I think I found it most impactful at the collaboratory, because you could see what machines were open when and signing up, and you could look up on the board, kind of like going in an Apple store and see like opening at 3:30. I thought that was really inviting to like come and use the space when you would know when it's open.
They use the same software we do. So that was helpful to know. For the signups.
Yeah.
For all the, right?
Yes.
So yeah.
Those are my thoughts.
Great.
I will repeat, those were great comments. Having been there quite a few times, I always want to remain cognizant of the size and the space that they're to us, and I come away thinking you folks have done a really good job with the space that you have, by the way. So nothing to take away from, you know, they're spoiled in a way, especially when you go into their first floor and you're able to see. But one thing I really like just to sort of think about is when you walk into their facility, and I always notice there's a vibrancy with their circulation desk and the folks that are always there. Like I've gone there at lunchtime, and then when we went in, there's always someone, a few people that are ready to help. And not that we necessarily need that, because our staff is wonderful. They're always helping when you go upstairs and stuff like that. But as we get more into like the library of things and all these different sort of evolution, right, of why people come to the library, there's probably something to think about there with when people enter the lobby and they're like, I'm going to need to do a copy, or how do I fax, or all the crazy things that people come up with that aren't that complicated, but they're coming in here to jump right in. And not that there's a line to see the person at the front, but that's so when you see a few people there, you feel like asking questions or interacting. That was something that I've always there. At the same time, like the second floor, I sort of like our second floor with respect to the adult section compared to theirs. I know they've revamped it and stuff, and they have some good professional areas and like the division of areas, so that's nice. But at the same time, in ours, I feel like we can move around nice and seamlessly upstairs to different groups and areas as well. I mean, putting the children downstairs is convenient for a number of reasons. That's something that we just can't do. So again, it goes back to what we're capable of with the space. I think we utilize our space pretty well. So I'll repeat the other things, but all good feedback.
Can you talk a little bit more about with the kind of more vibrancy in the lobby, and are you looking for having more of like you mentioned, like the copiers and faxing and stuff? Like, are you looking for having more? Can you talk more about that?
No, I'm not suggesting that we put copy machines down here or anything like that, but just the ability for folks to know where things are and to sort of come in. It's kind of understood when you come in here, but going up to the second level so that you know where things are and having, because in their facility, every time I go in there, wraparound desk, there are multiple people there and they're doing different things. They're not all just checking out books and stuff like that. So it's just something I've always noticed is that there's a buzz over there and chatter stuff, and there's just different patrons going and talking to staff members.
So having, I guess what I'm hearing you say is like, how do we have more of like a welcome desk feel?
Yeah, and like if you read the feedback, and again, it's part of our structure, right?
Right.
People complain that we're not as inviting like our lobby as other libraries, and I don't think that's. I like our lobby. I like our staff. You're not going to compete necessarily with like just the open sight lines and the high ceilings and some of the things that they have, but at the same time, it's the people that also make the library, and we know that very well. We have a great staff. So, but again, you know better than I do and others how much the patrons are asking questions or expecting someone here at the front desk.
I'm also hearing maybe multiple someones that like we have two separate desks and it's always staffed by one individual person, and maybe it's less intimidating to walk up to three staff members who are all engaged in different activities.
They're interacting with each other,
And
stuff like that.
You're really talking just a sort of a little bit of an energy, a feeling of energy.
But remember, they also have, like when you walk in before the doors open, they have like their refreshment rooms and stuff like that. So again, they have the luxury of space, and they have these rooms that are much larger. Like ours are a little open, stuff like that. So it could be the space, but
They also make really good use of their vertical space on the first floor, like thinking about the pillars that had the like printed signage on it that we kept picking at to see if it was vinyl or paper. I'm sure Annie loved that. And we got kicked out. I think they made really good use of that as both promoting summer reading, but then also like guideposts for where you're going, for where things are. Like you walk in here and yes, we have the hanging signs in the lobbies, but it's not always clear, like where are you going if you want fiction? Where are you going if you're looking for the children's section? I do think the library of things being digitized was really impressive, and I don't know that we have a need to reclaim that wall space, and certainly having a digitized screen there would take up space anyway, but it just like, it makes it easier to navigate, to
Right.
see what's there. And to put a hold on something because you can do it right there by scanning the
So
card.
they have a screen you could
Yeah,
tap.
it was all
Oh,
touch
that's
screen.
cool. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was.
Sorry,
It was.
it was.
Like one of those.
Yeah.
Kiosks.
Oh, yeah, it was,
I also really appreciated their commitment to community artists. All of their sculptures and paintings and everything, like murals, were all local artists. And I think that's a testament to how enmeshed everything is there. Even if Anna would not flip over the sculpture. They also had, I liked the different seating vignettes, and I actually really like that they're scattered throughout. I think like Adam, that it's not just centralized in one place, that you're sitting in one place with everyone. Like, and I know we're a little bit limited, that we have some soft seating that looks out over windows, but I like that there were options everywhere so you could really find what you were comfortable with and where you wanted to be in terms of noise levels and what else was happening. There's no way we can do this, but that wall between the collaboratory and classroom space, so it could be like open or closed, was really impressive and really thoughtful in how they did that. And I also thought their quiet study room was absolutely incredible. Like that was like collegiate level quiet study, and it
Is that
felt like going
through
to
the archive?
Yeah,
Yeah.
very quiet in there, very like away from other things and from the commotion, and it just also like gave that energy of, this is a quiet space, don't violate things. Like I felt bad going in there. I also liked, they had some flexible displays that I thought were really smart. Like their seed library was a rolling cart that doesn't always need to be a seed library, which makes sense because you don't want that out 12 months a year. And I imagine that that's a different kind of display the other like 8 months out of the year. And would be interested to know like what it gets replaced with. But I thought that flexibility and having like a rolling cart with an actual display, but doesn't always have to be the same kind of display, was really smart.
I'm sorry, I just want to make, to tie some of the conversation around the lobby being about behavioral wayfinding is what we're talking about, is that walking into that space, it visually told you how to accomplish the behavior you wanted to accomplish there, and where you needed to go to do that. And it's less visible in this space, and that's not necessarily meaning putting staff or volunteers. That's like deliberate signage that connects with what is the problem I'm trying to solve walking in the door, and where do I need to go to take care of that.
I think we often assume that everyone walking in the door has been here before. And so I try to think a bit from the perspective of, if we assume that this is the first time they've ever visited and they don't know where anything is, but like even if you assume that they've been to a library, that coming in, it is not easy to immediately see, like you're saying, where to go and what to do. And if you are like me, I like talking to people, but I don't necessarily like going up in new spaces and asking them. I want to just figure it out myself. And so then.
But I think when I was principal, we had something called morning greeters. And that meant a teacher at every door where children were coming in, because it set the tone. And it was good morning, so-and-so, have a great day. And I think that's what you're talking about, is having somebody, whether it's a volunteer, and there are so many people out there who are gracious and welcoming. When I come in, I'm lucky if I get a nod and somebody is doing their work. But if somebody is designated to be a greeter and purposefully says, welcome, is there something I can help you with? Are you looking for something special? It doesn't have to be a big deal, nor does it have to be a staff person, but somebody who is a smile and is there.
They have similar things in hospitals, actually.
And it's just, it makes a difference because the minute you walk in, somebody sees you and you see somebody with a smile. So. Readers.
The reader was great. He had lots of jokes for us about the statue.
Yeah.
The security, wasn't he?
I assumed he was a greeter. I don't think that man was going to stop anything from happening.
No, but I do think he was
he
a
was
security.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
Oh, he was.
He was, yeah.
he also had many jokes.
For a library to have security out,
Um,
a suburban library.
no, but Schaumburg is, after Chicago, the largest library in the state. And so they pull in people from the wider Chicagoland area. The volume of people that they see,
Okay.
I think, really necessitates having, you know, because yes, they have a large population, but they also have, well, I mean, Nemeshkos. So like, there's a lot of people. So just when you have that many people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Skokie also has, I think, full-time security. Again, their building is like 1.5 tower size, and I don't know what their door count. Evanston does as well.
So
I don't know if
it's not
Evanston
unheard
does.
of. Okay.
I don't know if Evanston does at their branch. But yeah, I know they do it. I know that they have at least 2 full-time security monitors on staff.
At the risk of oversaturating the feedback, I just have one other point.
No, no.
actually, that-
So
And it sort of correlates. I know there's someone on staff working with like the Northbrook Historical Society about that stuff. And when you walked in the library at Schaumburg, or in their lobby, they had a display with like, you know, photographs that were on the wall, just like the history of the town and the library. And I just found that really inviting, and I liked looking at it.
The timeline was
The
good.
timeline, that's what
Yeah.
it was, yes.
the photos up in the boardroom.
Oh, that too. I was thinking
Was-
more just in the lobby, yeah.
I mean, but I think
Yeah.
that's another great example of how they've connected with the history of the library to bring it into the current.
Yeah. I think the flip side of that, though, is that their boardroom is really small and does not say the public is welcome at this meeting, if that's really where they're having board meetings, because I don't know where you would put the public in that room. Which I also felt the same way at Champaign, because that floor is locked most of the time. The other two did that.
There's a weirdly high number of libraries that have boardrooms in staff-only areas. It's odd. I don't know why. That was how it was at New Lenox at my last library. So whenever we had a guest, you know, someone come, we had to lead them through the staff areas, which always felt not great. I want them there. I just don't want them having to walk through staff.
Just absolutely on it.
No, no. Any other feedback?
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Quarterly strategic plan session.
Yes, so I put in the quarterly strategic plan update. I did want to just mention that as we've been doing these quarterly strategic plan updates, we've really just been talking about the activities that we're doing. And as we're now halfway through our first year with this, you know, strategic plan, one of the goals is, of course, to look at those outcomes-based. Yeah. One of the goals is to not just tell you what we're doing, but tell you the impact. I haven't been doing that in these quarterly reports, but we'll be doing that. Plan to do that at the end of year 1 and do that on an annual basis so that we can look at things a little bit more holistically. It's a little harder to do on a quarter-to-quarter basis, but I did want to call that out because I feel like it might seem like we weren't paying attention to that, but we are. And so I'm happy to report that we have made, we've gotten a lot done. We did kind of do a soft launch of the strategic plan at the end of 2024, but since starting the strategic plan, we have made the auditorium available for rent, did a data-driven study of our public computers. And while we only determined that we would reduce it by 1, that was a useful study just to see like what was actually needed. Becky completed, and Kelly spearheaded that with OSG, Becky completed our pay equity audit, and we've now made all of those pay adjustments to everyone on staff that received one. We've created the data dashboard with Mallory, and that went live last month. Anna has worked with varying degrees of frustration with the elevator modernization, but we're getting there. And also upgrading, in redoing the parking lot, we also upgraded our accessible parking spots to make them, to change where they were located, and based on patron feedback, so that we have some on the west side of the building. We also had an unexpected little piece of work that we had to do with the rain pipe water situation earlier this year, and now the digital media lab is fully restored and reopened. We've also been doing AI programming series for patrons, not just looking at like, here's how to use AI, but also talking about the pros and cons and some of the challenges and the sustainability impacts. And so this is something that will be ongoing, but is something that we've already had great interest and participation in from the community. Kelly has been working very closely with Jaffe Emergency Services, and we'll be rolling out our updated emergency operation procedures. This was something that was originally going to be a year 2 project, but that we moved in light of the world and things happening here. So all of those were things that we've completed in the first half of the first year of the strategic plan, which I think is great. We are, as we enter into the second half, working on a number of things that we're going to be focusing our attention on. The biggest one is the website update. This is something that Linda is working on and has already put together a staff committee, and will be coming to present to the board on what the timeline for those updates are. Kelly and now Anna are working on changing our internet service provider, because District 225, as Kelly has explained in the past, is no longer going to be offering that, because all the schools now get free internet. We have staff working on our comprehensive programming plan, which is going to allow us to make better decisions about the variety and number of programs we offer, to make sure we're hitting the different populations that we have in our community, the different ages, the different identities, the different interests. We also are working on and have a beta test in process for our AI guidelines for our operations of our library, and are looking at a full staff rollout of that. We've introduced it to the management team and are doing some kind of testing with that in September. We will have the second full assessment by Lily Zhang this September. And starting this fall, Anna and I will be starting work again on the master facilities plan review. We also have this, as I'm saying, all of this feels like a lot, all of which is in process, except for the master plan review, which will be coming. Kelly has been working with Jaffe, in addition to the emergency operation procedures, on the RFP for the security technology upgrades. We're starting with the door fobs, with the fobs. I'm sorry, they were not supposed to call them fobs.
Access control.
Access control. Liz Rupert keeps saying like, they're not necessarily going to be fobs. They might be cards. I'm like, isn't that the same? It's apparently not. So access control. After which we'll work on the security cameras and the PA system. And so all of those are projects that we're continuing to work on, that all feed directly into the overall goals and objectives that we have made for the strategic plan. So that is my update, in addition to everything that I shared in the board packet. I'd love to know, I kind of blended the report Kelly did in April and kind of took from the first report how the presentation of this report was. I know it's a lot of information, so I just want to check in and make sure that it is not too much, or it's presented in a way that is digestible. And of course, if you have any questions on any of the things that I covered.
It's a lot of information.
It is a lot of information. So if it's too much, I can of course Yeah,
Good accomplishment.
very
There's
good.
a lot.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
How did you feel, and Kelly and everybody, about the direction that this provided for you? This is very deliberate. And what, I'm not talking about the format of this, but what you've done is it's deliberate. It's not putting out fires. It's not responding to the crisis of the day. It's very purposeful and focused, and it feels like you've accomplished. I mean, it feels like you can wrap your hands around things that you can point to and say, yes,
We did this.
we did it, or we are doing it, rather than kind of.
Like, oh, maybe we'll get to this, or oh, we kind of tried this.
And do you feel that it in some way enables you to be more focused? Does it enable you to feel that you have a direction when you're needing to address this particular project or whatever it is? It just felt very focused and purposeful and practical, and I really appreciated that.
And it makes it easy to say no.
Yeah.
I like to say yes to things. I'm interested in like a million things. I was talking with Linda Varing, our marketing and communications manager, a couple weeks ago, and we started talking about something. We're like, oh, and it would be great. It would be, and I said, wait. I said, no, we can put this on a list of like a parking lot or someday, but this, while cool, doesn't fit into where we need to be putting our energy. She's like, oh, you're right. Okay, yeah. And none of us felt like, oh, but we should figure out a way to put it in there. It was like, no, it's not part of the plan. And so I love a plan. It was so hard during the pandemic and after until we had this navigating. I personally, and I won't speak for Kelly or Becky or Anna, but I work better with a plan. And so this has been wonderful for me. The emergencies still happen, but then it allows you, when that is done, to go back to like, okay, well, there's stuff, but this is the important stuff. And so some of this other stuff is going to fall and we're not going to do it. And it won't be done quite as perfectly. Or we might not get back to people in, on something that isn't as critically important and as timely a manner, because we know that this is where we need to be putting our energy. So that's my take on it. But Kelly and Becky, of course, are also very heavily involved in all of this.
And I know Kate wouldn't say this for herself, so I'm going to say it for her, but during our one-on-one this week, we actually sat down for a good chunk of time and just mapped out for the next 6 months all of my projects and visualized it by task, timeline, where are things hitting month to month. And then we could see, because what I've heard from the board and from Kate is like, really, there's a little bit of flexibility and give in some of these deadlines. Let's not create an arbitrary deadline. So Kate, using her incredible data visualization skills that she has, she won't say herself, but she did use, technology to create this chart for me that I can then refer back to. Because in my field, we need to juggle multiple things at the same time, that they're all competing, but she helped map it out so it feels more realistic now and doable. So that when we come back, it all sounds like a lot in paper, but it's each increment that we're doing month to month to month. So there's a lot of exciting things happening.
Yeah, I think it has definitely helped with capacity and prioritization. I really am pleased to see us folding in what we've learned in our EDI work about how important staff feedback is when we're making decisions. And coming up in year 2, there's a lot of opportunity for community input on some of the initiatives that we're starting to look into. And that does take longer, but I think we're coming up with more thoughtful, inclusive solutions to a lot of the issues. So, for example, the AI guidelines for staff is looking at ethical use of AI and how it can be used in the library. And so we've started with our managers. We got a lot of really great feedback from them with concerns. And then we were like, we've got to really put this into practice with a specific case to see where it works and where it doesn't before we broaden it out to all staff, and then all staff will have an opportunity to provide feedback as well. So that's been really valuable, just having that kind of baked in to the process and knowing that it's helping us meet our strategic directions.
I congratulate you. Because you can have words on a page, but it's what you do with them in practice. And if it's not only effective for the library and the community, but also effective for you in your leadership roles, if it makes your job easier, it won't make it easier, but it'll give
Clearer.
it a little bit more clarity, perhaps. So, thanks.
Any other questions or feedback?
Just one piece of feedback. It's amazing to see all the completed tasks.
Yes.
The fact that you're seeding them throughout the report kind of diminishes the power of the
Yeah.
comprehensiveness of what's completed.
So you want like what I have on my cheat sheet.
I like the little explosions.
Yeah, love the explosion. Just stack them all next to each other, you know.
Be trying to add a bit of whimsy.
Yeah, love the whimsy.
Yeah. Thank you. That is a great piece of feedback. I
And your
appreciate
summary
it.
at the top here.
Yeah. Because I do think it is important to celebrate all the work that we're doing.
Yeah. And then the momentum builds as that list gets bigger and bigger.
Anything else before we move on? We are not having closed session tonight. Agenda building for August. Kate already teased that Linda will be joining us to talk about the website up.
Except that she just found out her son's college move-in day is August 21st.
Well, that's rude of Eastern Michigan and they should fix that.
I agree. I 100% agree.
Okay.
So she will be coming in September.
Okay, so my annotated agenda is wrong. Okay. Okay, so Linda will not be joining us. Lies.
Until September.
Oh, it does say needs to be. Okay, got it. Sorry. Okay, well, I invited via Kate some teen volunteers and a teen librarian to come talk about the teen volunteer program. If you're not following them on TikTok, you should be because it's the best thing happening on TikTok.
They're pretty
That's
great.
standards also low. Anyway, Jason, our new facilities manager, will be joining us, and we will have another update from the room rental policy review working group. Anything else that anyone would like to add to the August agenda? Okay, then we will adjourn at 9:19 p.m.